We are live. This is part of the Yes California continuing series of one-on-one interviews with ballot qualified candidates. The people that you see in these one-on-one interviews will be the people that will appear for a vote and could potentially be the next governor of the world's fifth largest economy and 40 million people. This is a continuation of the Recall Candidate debate series hosted exclusively by Yes California, where we've interviewed 25% of all declared and ballot qualified candidates, more candidates and more appearances than anyone else. With us today is Daniel Watts. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were there in the first recall. Is that correct, sir?
Yes. Yeah. In 2003, when I was a college student, I was 20 years old, and I ran for governor on the one-issue platform of lower student fees with money I won on Wheel of Fortune that year. It makes a good story during job interviews and first dates and first conversations. Everybody always wants to ask about Wheel of Fortune. They're like, wait, you did what? And you were on Wheel of Fortune? That's what people really care about.
Yeah, for me, the whole story is you took the money and then you ran for office and then you're doing it twice. I mean, you were in these historic events. I mean, they're talking about the recall election in England. So you were in a historical event in 2003 and a second one in 2020. I mean, it's there's not many humans.
There was a big group of us, minor candidates that year, the ones that people haven't really heard of. And I was 20. I was basically a child. And me and all these other people, we would have get-togethers. We went to the USS Hornet in Alameda in the Bay Area, and we rented out their mess hall. About 50 of us went there, all running for governor together, and just us went inside the mess hall. We walked up the plank to the ship, and we were inside the aircraft carrier, and we came up with a resolution. We all voted like it was a student government or something, and we had a statement, and everybody participated. And then we went out, and about 10 of us got to read a couple lines of it in front of the cameras. There were like 20 cameras that were there and newspapers that came, because never before have you had 50 people running for governor of California in the same room together. So we could get media attention, which was so much more important back then, that we couldn't get as individuals who are just a college student running for governor. But now it matters a lot less. And so the difference between that election and this election, I've noticed this election, there's not that same sense of camaraderie, where I haven't had any meetups. I haven't heard of any meetups. I think that's also part of the accelerated time period. It's a much shorter election. Last time the timeline started around the same time, but the election was in October rather than September.
Yeah.
And then back then there was no social media. So the only way to get out your message was to walk around the state, or some people hired a bus. About 10 candidates rented a bus and followed Arnold Schwarzenegger up and down the state as he was campaigning. And whenever Arnold got out of his bus, 10 of them would follow him up to his rallies and try to hand out flyers. So that hasn't happened this time, but I also don't think it's necessary, because last time there were maybe 5 candidates that got more than 10,000 votes out of 135 people running. There were like five candidates, maybe 10. So like 10% or fewer. This time, there are tons of candidates who are showing up in the polls. I have been tied with Kevin Faulconer in a couple of.
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
As he brought it up, we'll go ahead and show you. And then I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, and this didn't happen in 2003. None of us were in the polls. So it varies from poll to poll. I've ranged from some polls they don't even ask about me, so obviously I get a 0. But when they ask about me, I usually get 1% to 4%. I think 4% was the most I got, and 1%. And then some other candidates like Holly Beatty, who's also been on these debates, she's gone up to 5%, and then she's been down to 1%. John Drake, even this year's college student, this year's me from 2003.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask. Yeah.
I think it's awesome that he's running. So yeah, we've been tied with people like Kevin Faulconer, who is the former mayor of San Diego, who's spending millions of dollars on his campaign. So social media, I think, has really supplanted the need to campaign in a traditional way.
Let me ask you quickly. Larry Elder, Kevin Paffrath, John Cox, Kevin Faulconer. These are the media says the top ones. And then here we have John Drake, Beatty, McGowan, Ross, all participating in the SCA debates. and then Kilpatrick, Ventresca, Daniel Watts all participated in the SCA debates. Kevin Kiley and Armando Mondo Perez refused. Looking at this chart, does it look like the people who participated in Yes California events polled better than those who refused to participate?
I actually can't see the chart. I don't know why, but
Well, let's fix
it
that.
might just be on my screen. But
Well, let me.
I know that the top. I know that I read your email, so I know that a lot of the if
Can you
it's in
see
the
this
email,
now?
if it's the same chart that you sent in the email. Yeah, I don't know that it's because of the debates, but I think that the people that are putting in a little effort, talking on social media, showing up to these kind of things, they're doing all right. And they're about equal with Kevin Faulconer. I mean, Larry Elder, I don't think has been in your debates, and he's blowing everyone out of the water. But that's because everybody already knows who he is.
Yeah, I mean, if you had millions of dollars and fame and fortune, but when we're looking at these people, it looks like, well, I mean, there's two people who refused, and there's at least 3 to 4 candidates who outrank them in this poll. And they did the Yes California debates as one of the main formats of explaining themselves. And the reason that I know that is because nobody else is doing debates, basically. So if you weren't on one of those big televised ones, it's kind of this or nothing.
Yeah, the televised ones are funny because they only had like 5 people there, and Kevin Kiley, John Cox, and Kevin Faulconer those were 3 of the 5 or 6 people that they had on TV that they're considering major candidates. I've outpolled all 3 of them in certain polls, and so have like 10 other people. So you're like, oh yeah, Kevin Kiley is a big major candidate. All right, well, he's polling 2%, just like me, just like John Drake. So anyway, I think that what really mattered this year is that social media, but also the ballot statements. Voters are paying attention to what it says in the ballot. I really think that's the truth, because I put on my ballot designation free speech lawyer, Democrat, free speech lawyer, and then my ballot statement is short and sweet. It just says, imagine a California with free college and universities and a government that support free speech. That's basically what I put in there, and that's all I'm really running on. And I think that resonated with people that are just saying, like, look, who's the least, who's the either the most like me, the person who says the things that are most in line with what I believe, or who's the least crazy. And for some people, those two things are the opposite. Like someone that is some kind of crystal hippie that goes to Sedona, Arizona to worship aliens through a monocle or whatever. They might look at Holly Beatty and say, like, she's the least crazy person on the ballot. I'm going to vote for her.
We just interviewed Beatty 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was exciting. But then someone else looks at, like, I've literally had people say, like, you seem like the only person who's sane, or the person who's the least annoying. And that's what people have said to me. I like the other candidates. I like Holly Beatty, but I think that that's one reason that she's doing well in the polls, because there's a huge segment of the population that believes in the things that she does and is on her level, the same vibration, as she might say. And so she's doing really well with those people.
She's
people
the Marianne Williamson of the governor race.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it reminds me very much of her.
Yeah. Let me ask you, though, this is what we get to right away. So these are interviews for each candidate. We'll do one-on-one. We'll talk about their campaign, but we'll spend an equal amount of time asking them the big question that we always do here at Yes California. But first, before we get to that, Daniel, I'm going to switch around the way I do the interviews a little bit, just because I think you're very plain spoken, and I think this will help the interview move along faster. So we are in a cigar store, you and me. You don't know me. I just bumped into you. I'm buying a cigar. And you are looking at that, and we strike a conversation. You have 2 minutes to get inside my head and convince me, or at least incept me. Make it where when I walk away, I can't get that phrase out of my head. I can't get that idea out of my head. I can't get that piece of truth. What is it would you say to me, random stranger, cigar store, 2 minutes max, to get inside my head that you are the person who should be the next governor of the world's 5th largest economy?
Well, I'd say I'm a free speech lawyer, and my platform is free speech, and free college. And I'm running on only those two things because I think there are two things that no one else is talking about in this election, but they're very important. UC San Diego spent $800,000 trying to shut down a student newspaper. That's taxpayer money that's going to lawyers to fight against free speech. They got sued by the ACLU, and it's a student newspaper that was getting $450 in activity fees from the student government. And the UC San Diego administration thought that they had printed an offensive article, and so they spent $800,000. That's insane. That should never happen. And if I were governor, I would, day one, I would have an executive order commanding all the universities to do a comprehensive review of their student conduct codes to make sure that it complies with the law. The reason that that university had to spend so much money is because they got sued for violating the Constitution, and they ended up losing in the Ninth Circuit. You can very easily stop that from happening again by telling universities to comply with the Constitution, which they have to do anyway. And for those who immediately do comply, they're tuition free. For 1/10 of this year's budget surplus, you can make every UC and Cal State 100% tuition free. And only those universities that immediately comply with the First Amendment would get to be tuition free. So that's an incentive for them to comply faster. And it also gives them a competitive advantage over other universities. So a vote for me is a vote for those two principles. And whoever becomes the next governor, and it's not going to be me because we look at the polls, Governor Newsom's going to do fine. But if I get a lot of votes, it shows him something important. It shows him that free speech and free college are things that people care about. So that's why I want votes. I want votes to show the governor two things that he should do. Once he's done with the recall, he should look at the people who got votes and say, well, why did that person get votes? Very simple reason why I would get votes. So that would send a message.
And the message, so you're kind of running as basically the idea is that here's a candidate, you know you can't beat the candidate, but you move slightly outside their orbit, so you pull them into your orbit. Ross Perot did this famously with the Clinton-Bush election, right, where he talked about balancing the budget. Neither the Republicans or the Democrats were thinking about that, but Perot raised the profile of that idea so much that it was basically a done deal. Whoever got elected was gonna do that thing. So some people look at the Perot campaign as a failure, but if you look at it as far as getting an issue solved that they were never going to touch, it was a wild success. Many other people have ran to the left or ran to the right of a campaign. It sounds like you're running to a little bit to the left of Newsom to get the California government to move specifically in a particular policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd call it left or right. I think free speech is a universal value that I think everybody can get behind. I think free college, if people think about it, it's not. We all pay for universities already. We have plenty of money that the government's already collecting. It doesn't require raising taxes. Stop charging tuition. Why we don't charge tuition for high school? Why would we charge tuition for college? They're both getting state subsidies. So, but yeah, the goal is to push the government in a certain direction. And if by some incredible fluke, like everybody else died in a nuclear accident, and I became governor because I'm the only candidate left, those are the things I would do. Those are the things I'm promising to do. Because those are the things that are important to me. Those are the things I've studied and I know about. And so that's why I'm running. You know, I ran on a lower student fees platform in 2003 when I was a kid, when I was 20 years old in 2003. So I've been consistent on that for a long time.
Well, that's the next question is why those two issues? There's many issues. Why those two? Why did you settle on those two? There's no wrong or right answer. Just put me inside your head. What is it where you go, I have to focus on two things? Why?
Well, those two things are so important to me because they've been my entire life. At certain points in my life, my entire life has revolved around either the cost of education or free speech. I was at UC San Diego when they raised tuition in 2003 by 30% in 1 year. I know in 1 year, 30%. It's insane. And they do this every 3 or 4 years, every 5 years. They'll suddenly hike up tuition, and it just keeps going up, and it exceeds the price of it exceeds inflation. The rate of inflation. Yeah, by a lot. And there's no reason for doing that. And I think that everybody should have the ability, if you have the desire to go to college, you should have the ability to go to college. I don't think cost should be a factor. So that's always been important to me. Education is important to me. And then free speech. I'm a free speech lawyer. That's why I went to law school. It's because of when I was at UC San Diego as an undergrad, they were trying to shut down the newspaper. They actually shut down 2 TV stations there while I was there, student-run TV stations, because one of them showed an Iraq war video showing something that the terrorists did, and that TV station got shut down. Another one showed a video that was raunchy on it. They're both, this is closed circuit campus TV, like only adults can watch it. But the students were fine with it, but the administration forced them to shut these stations down. And when I was there at school, we went to the ACLU. We called them. We called the Student Press Law Center. No one would take our calls except for one organization called the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. They're based in Philadelphia. They defend constitutional rights on college campuses. They have a database showing, they give like red light, green light ratings to colleges, whether they're compliant with the First Amendment. And that was the only organization that would take our calls. I wanted to be, and now I am, the lawyer that takes those calls from students. So for 20 years, I've been really concerned with that. When I was in high school, same thing. Whenever something was offensive that was published in the student newspaper, the administration would try to crack down on it. And so these two things go hand in glove. The college, price of education. Once you get in, you think, oh, it's freedom of inquiry. You have this zone where you can say whatever you want and feel free to say offensive things, figure out what the truth is. But that's not the reality right now. Right now, the reality on college campuses is that the administration and some of the students, for some god-awful reason, are trying to promote censorship. They're afraid of ideas. They're afraid of offensive things. So free speech needs to be taught. But I think we need to get as many students as we can into college who want to get to college. But then once they're there, we got to teach them about the First Amendment, man. It's a problem. They don't understand it.
So you really are and have spent your adult life dealing with and impacted, and this is a real issue, college financing and freedom of speech, especially on college campuses. You embody this. You've done it for 20 years. This is who you are. This isn't something that you thought would be an effective angle for running for office. This is what you're about, and you just applied you to the description of running for office. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I talk a lot about the college campuses and free speech, but it's a problem in general in California. There's a woman who ran for city council in Oceanside named Michelle Gomez, and she filed a defamation lawsuit against campaign workers who she didn't pay. She didn't pay these guys. They went to the media. San Diego Union Tribune wrote an article about it, and then she sued them all for defamation. It was a frivolous lawsuit, totally without merit. Most of them caved because it's very expensive to fight back in litigation. One of them hired me, and I filed an anti-SLAPP motion to strike and literally drove her into bankruptcy. She filed bankruptcy rather than face the gigantic fee award that she's eventually going to have to pay us because of her malicious acts. But that's someone who ran for office. That was a Democrat who ran for office in Oceanside, who purports to be this woman of the people. But then she's smashing all these poor little campaign workers who she owed like $300 to. And so, like, just pay the $300 and they won't go to the Union Tribune. They won't go to the newspapers. But that happens all the time. We've got Devin Nunes, a congressman in the Central Valley, who's suing a parody account on Twitter that says Devin Nunes' cow. There's another one that says Devin Nunes' mom. And they just troll him on Twitter. No one thinks it's his actual mom. No one thinks it's his actual cow. But they're making fun of him for allegedly hiring undocumented workers at his ranch. His mom is making fun of him for being ugly or something like that. But he's suing them for libel and harassment and all these things. You're a sitting congressman, Mr. Nunes. Grow some thick skin. And his lawsuits get thrown out, but it's expensive to fight them. And so we have our own government that doesn't understand or value free speech. So when they're doing things like that, and Trump does that too, everybody knows he files a bunch of lawsuits of defamation and that kind of thing. If our own government doesn't set a good example, what kind of example is that for the rest of us? And at college, when you have administrators that are fighting to smash a newspaper because it said some naughty words, What are the students going to think is right and wrong? What are they going to think about what the First Amendment means? If they say, oh, well, the school sued the koala newspaper to shut them up, that means that, well, they must know what they're doing. I mean, that's the university. These are grown-ups. But they don't. They lose $800,000 on attorney's fees. So it's a big problem where people don't value the First Amendment, don't understand it. And so that's why I decided to run, to try to get that message out there that it's important.
How well has that been going? Are people resonating with the message? Do they agree that it's an issue? Are you able to connect with the voters and get them to say, hey, this is the priority we need to be, this is the battlefront, the chief, the top of the mountain that we need to be focusing on? What's the reaction?
Yeah, I think people are encouraged. Or people like the message. They like free college, free speech. That resonates. But it's and I'm not going to lie, it's not the most important thing in the world. There are bigger issues, but everybody else is talking about those bigger issues. I'm not saying these are the most important things on the planet.
Okay.
These are the things I can talk about authentically, and I think people appreciate that. I'm not trying to go out and talk about what we're going to do about climate change or gas taxes or things like that, because I haven't looked into that. And other people are talking about that, people that are better at that than I am. I'm better than anyone who's running on free speech and free college because I've been doing this 20 years. I've been thinking about it.
Well, then let's dive into that. Can California have free college? We famously did for decades when our universities were the best in the entire planet. Somehow we afforded it. Now everybody says you can't have that and have good universities, which is a lie because we actually did it once before. Why did it go away? And why is it now when we talk about free college? I've literally talked to people in California and said free college tuition. They go, oh, that's communism, that's socialism, we could never afford it. And I go, but we did it before. And they go, really? I go, yeah, I wasn't even around. I just read about it. It existed for a good couple decades. The universities were the best on earth. Why are people skeptical that we could do it again, given that we did it spectacularly before?
They have been trained to distrust anything that's given out for free, but you pay for it with your tax dollars. But
Right.
A service that you're not charged for using, I think people have just gotten selfish. I don't know. Or they just don't understand that it's possible. I actually had one voter. Sometimes I get people calling me on my cell phone, sending me emails, and I had someone say like, "Oh, this is irresponsible of you to say free college because you know that could never work with the way our system's set up. That's impossible because we charge for college." I'm like, I know we charge for college. I'm saying we shouldn't. It doesn't mean you can't change the system just because it's set up this way. It was free, yeah, till Ronald Reagan was governor, and we started charging tuition fees. They were small, but you paid them, and then they got bigger and bigger as time went on. And the state, in bad budget years, which we used to have a long time ago, they would ratchet back the state support, and then the universities would ratchet up the fees. And they've hired so many more administrators over the years. I mean, the administration universities are super top heavy with administrators now.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's 1/10 of this year's budget surplus though could supplant all of the tuition that's raised at UCs and Cal State. That's just 1/10 of this year's surplus.
So why didn't Newsom do that?
Why didn't he do that? Because I wasn't running when he wrote his budget. I don't know. He wanted to give away lottery.
He had the money. He was saying, we got more money than we know what to do with. Californians overwhelmingly support free college when you look at it. You're sitting governor. You're a Democrat. It's what the majority of the people want. You got the money. It's not an issue. How come you couldn't get it done?
Yeah, I don't know. But that's why I'm running, to remind him these things are important too. There's a lot of stuff that the governor does, a lot of different priorities. I think this should be a priority. I think that college education should be a priority. In these polls that they do, they show where you rank in different things. I'm in third place among people 18 to 34 in one of the polls that split it up that way. I'm in third. I outpoll like everybody except for
John Drake.
Yeah, no, I beat John Drake.
You beat John Drake?
Yeah, among 18 and 34-year-olds.
You hear that, Drake? You hear that? He's beating you out in your own
in the one poll. In the one poll.
Okay, John Drake, though, you heard it here first. John, the first generation John Drake is beating out the second generation John Drake.
Yeah. Well, it's
And Paul, let's
as long as the governor gives free speech, we all win. I mean, free college, free speech, we all win.
well, let's go to that one. Is free speech as we knew it possible in California? This is the place where, unlike, I mean, I think there was maybe one university in all of America and 5 here in California where they literally chased the speaker out and shut it down with a mini riot. We seem to react very, very, very poorly to people we don't like talking, coming to our universities far, far beyond whatever America does. Given that we have such a visceral reaction, how realistic is this that we're going to go back to the period of free speech when it's defined by at least half the population here as hate speech?
Well, the law hasn't changed. And there's this great book. It's called The Coddling of the American Mind. And I commend it to everyone. It's very good. It's written by guys that work at FIRE, that organization I talked about, the foundation. And it explains that this is not just a California thing, but the University of Minnesota and I mean, Harvard and Yale, really the higher caliber universities have the biggest problem for some reason with this. And I think some of the problems are that students have been trained since a young age to equate words with violence and to conflate the two. Yeah. And that's not the case. They've learned what the Coddling of the American Mind calls untruths, which are that anything that hurts me makes me weaker, even if I survive it, which is not true. That's not the case. If people are mean to you and you get through it, it can make you stronger. There are things in cognitive behavioral therapy where you try to consciously recognize your reaction to negative stimulus and change it yourself just with your mind, and then eventually you become a more settled person and you don't react like painfully to everything. But if you instead look at things to take offense at and try to take offense at them, try to feel the hurt and sit there and think about your trauma like all day long, you are going to feel bad. That's the truth, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it's not the words that you heard that are making you feel that way. It's you. You're making yourself feel that way. So, and these are things that are taught at a young age. And so they become rote. They become part of people's personalities when they get older and when they get to college, instead of being free like they used to be, like in the 60s, where all kinds of crazy stuff was happening. Oh my God, these like conservative guys would come to college and then they see all this hippie nonsense and they're like, oh my God, my mind is blown. Like, oh, everything's offensive to me, but oh, I'm thinking outside the box now. That's not what college students want. They want to go to college and feel protected. They want to go to college and feel safe. Safety. That's another thing. You don't have to, it's the idea of safety, physical safety is very important. But if someone's mean to you, or if you read an offensive comic book, that doesn't make you unsafe. That might offend you. It might make you upset, but it doesn't make you unsafe. And so that's another way that that universities and people raising students these days have tried to conflate words with violence. Now, words make you unsafe, and when you do that, I've tried to explain this to people that the First Amendment right now, like I said, the law hasn't changed. The First Amendment is the same as it's been for 30 years, and the courts are very strong on it. But that doesn't mean it can't change in the future. If we train an entire generation of students to devalue speech, to add more and more exceptions to the First Amendment right of free expression, to add to fraud and true threats of violence and these other things, add saying something mean or saying something sexist. If you add these other exceptions, then eventually those people are going to go to law school. And if they're taught those same things, or they fight back against their teachers and call the teacher sexist if they try to teach a case that says, no, that's not how the law works. And then they graduate, then they get appointed, and then they're judges. And then now if everybody's a judge and they're all thinking this way, then the law has changed, because the law is only as good as the people enforcing it. Right. So I think it's important to nip this in the bud and to train students in the value of the First Amendment now. And the way that I do that it's not just liberal students that are mad about this. There's also conservatives that feel unsafe if somebody says something about their religion or about abortion or about Trump. Like some people get mad if somebody calls Trump a fascist or a racist, and they're like, well, that makes me feel unsafe as a Trump supporter. No, you're doing the same thing that you hate. You're equating words with violence, and it's not. So it's important for people to understand that whoever's enforcing these laws or anti-speech policies, they're not always going to agree with you. So like today, Governor Newsom is the governor of California. And let's say the governor has a power to say with a stroke of a pen what constitutes hate speech. That's one example of what is protected speech. You can say hateful things as long as it's not a true threat threatening to kill somebody because of their race, but you can say other bad things. So imagine if Governor Newsom could define hate speech. He might define it in a way that you like. But what if he's recalled? What if Larry Elder's the governor? He might define it in a different way. Maybe to him, hate speech is saying something negative about the police. Maybe saying F the police is hate speech. And in fact, many states have passed laws making it a hate crime to be mean to police officers in different ways. So they've added police officers as a protected class. So if you're punching somebody just because they stole your money, that it might be a crime, it might be battery, but it's not a hate crime. If you're punching them because of their race, that can be a hate crime. If you're punching them because they wear a top hat or they're a Monopoly man or something, like that's not a hate crime. It's not a protected class, being a Monopoly man. But in some states, being a police officer now is. So if you punch someone because they're a police officer, hate crime. So you just got to remember, the people that are in charge, you're not always going to agree with them. And so what the First Amendment does is restrict their power to punish you, to restrict speech. So and the same restrictions apply to people you like that are in charge and people you hate that are in charge. And so it's good to apply that evenly. Politics isn't all just about power. Sometimes it's about principles, and you should have consistent principles that let everybody say things that's an inherently good value, I think, allowing people to speak without fear of punishment. What you punish is what might result from that. If somebody punches you because of something somebody said, then that's different if it was true incitement. But you don't punish people just for saying generalities about what they think the world should be like.
I think it was Socrates who criticized the Greek government for launching a war, and he was criticized for being mean to the criticizing the veterans. And he says, I wasn't about that. I was just saying we made a disastrous call on a war. And they go, no, but you're being mean to you're criticizing the veterans, and it's offensive to the veterans. And so now you must kill yourself for speaking. And that's, that goes all the way back to the Greeks and our first concept of free speech. They were fighting the idea then. Okay, we're going to go to the second half of the show. We have an interview with Daniel Mercuri at 8. So we got to, move along a little bit here. I would like to ask you a question that we talk about here at Yes California. You can hate the idea, oppose it, say, hell no, I'm not for it. We just want to have a conversation. We just have a rational conversation. So, the idea of California becoming a nation, good, bad? What do you say?
I think as a practical matter, it's bad. I think I would oppose it. I think that it's beneficial for California to be part of the United States, both for the United States and for California. A lot of our universities get federal funding. We get a lot of money that comes back from that. We're integrated into that. It would cause a lot of problems for people who live in California if there was that kind of separation from the rest of the country. I think that it would be bad for the United States. I think it would make the United States a worse country without California in it. If you suddenly remove 40 million people and this huge group of Congress people and all the companies that are based here from the United States, you cripple that country. And I don't think the world benefits from having a United States that loses California. So I would oppose that. I mean, it can't easily happen. Won't happen. But I also, just as an academic matter, I don't think it should happen. I I like California. I like being a citizen of the United States. I like both those things. So, yeah, I would say California should stay a state.
Okay.
And you guys you're familiar, of course, with the state of Jefferson movement and that. Yeah. That's I mean, if something were to happen to change the borders of California, that would be something that is more likely and more reasonable than the entire state seceding and becoming its own country. I don't think that should happen either, but at least there you've got it would be a new state, and like it's happened before. West Virginia is carved off of regular ass Virginia, and other states have had their boundaries changed if the sufficient majorities agree in the different legislatures that have to approve that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that would be more realistic. But still, I wouldn't like to see that happen either.
Well,
just mainly because the state of Jefferson people are crazy, and I don't want them to have senators.
Well, it probably won't happen. So typically states are recognized units, not counties. Counties exist because the states are recognized. That's the only governmental unit in the Constitution that performs the unit, which means that if California left, it'd be up to Californians if they wanted to partition themselves within. The other thing is that when we've looked at polling on Californians and splitting up the state, it's been 67 to 73% have been against splitting up the state. Tim Draper was the billionaire who proposed splitting up California, and that idea falls in line with the Jefferson thing. And you have 2/3, 3/4 were against it. So they're never going to get the percentage of people they need to approve. They're not even anywhere close, according to these 3 different polls. However, there was a guy called Donald Trump. And when he was elected, the day after, Californians really lost it. The California legislature, not just, regular people, but the California legislature, Kevin De Leon, the 3rd highest ranking official in the California legislature, and the entire legislature, issued a statement the day after Trump was elected that said, "We feel like we woke up as strangers in a separate country because they don't share our values." That was the California government said that when America elected Trump. Additionally, at that time in February 2017, you had 32% of Californians said they wanted full-blown secession. That was by polling from Stanford University and Reuters Ipsos, 2 of the most reputable polling companies on earth. Both of those polls showed 47.5. Half of Californians were open to the idea of secession. Given that we have a legislature who says America is a foreign country after Trump was elected, and half of Californians, according to reputable polls in 2017, were willing to explore this idea, if Trump wins again or there's some other calamity, is this that crazy an idea to think that Californians will have a equally bad reaction?
I think that those polls and the people's reaction to when the president gets elected shows less about the viability of California as a separate country or the advisability of California as a separate country, and more about people shouldn't get so mad at who the president is. Get mad at the president, think he's a bad person and oppose his policies, but don't say you're going to secede from the country just because there's a different president. People said that under Bush. So many people said they'd leave the country if Bush were elected. Then they said the same thing about Obama, different people, but they said they'd leave if Obama was elected. People in Texas periodically say they're going to secede. They do that every once in a while. That's usually the reaction of a big group of people whenever someone they really don't like gets elected. So it's, I think that's a flash in the pan anger at who's president right now. I think if you pulled people right now, they'd be like, no, we love it. And California and Texas go back and forth on whether they're making fun of each other for threatening to secede. So when Texas was threatening to secede, when Obama was in charge, California was like, "Oh, Texas, you stupid secessionist. You're starting another civil war. Yeah, you tried this before. Remember, you lost." And then when Trump was elected in California, is like, "Oh yeah, we don't need to be part of this country anymore. This is not my country." Texas is like, "Oh, what? You don't like America, you unpatriotic bastards?"
Right.
Not remembering that they said the same thing 4 years earlier.
True.
So it's I think people just get angry too much and say.
But that sort of ignores the trajectory of this. The fact is that having 30 to 40% of a state say we want to secede because someone elected has never happened in American history before. These are new things, and they've never had percentages. I think you look at maybe 15%. We're looking at 35 to 45%. America is more divided than it's ever been, and it's more polarized than it's been since 1860, according to every poll out there. The fact is that people are getting more upset. They're not calming down, and there's literally nothing on the horizon suggesting the unification or calming down of the American electorate. And we're seeing people acting more outrageously each election. Why do we think that the next election won't be the one that passes the threshold?
Well, people could keep getting angry. They shouldn't. I think that this is a good argument for trying to teach people that you solve your differences civilly. You don't attack each other. You don't riot. You don't shout down each other's speakers. You don't try to imprison your enemies. Everybody always is now calling, lock her up, lock him up.
Right.
Like literally at both sides of rallies, lock him up, lock her up. And you don't call for the imprisonment of your political enemies. And especially if you're a candidate, so irresponsible to do that. And that's the kind of stuff that's riling people up. So I think it's this polarization is an indictment of the people running for office, and also the people that spend too much time reading propaganda memes on Facebook instead of just being normal people like we used to be. But yeah, I don't think it's a support for the. I mean, there's probably a lot of weird things that have gotten a lot of support. I think the percentage of the country that believes the moon landing was faked is probably skyrocketed to 47% too. I think there's a good percentage of the country that thinks like the Russians were behind 9/11 and they don't even know why. There's like an enormous number of crazy ideas that have gotten a lot of support in the last 5 years. And you're right, they might go up more, and it might become a majority of the country that thinks crazy things, that the moon is not real or the earth is flat, but it doesn't make it a good idea just because people think it's a good idea.
Absolutely. I was just talking about the trajectory. When before the election in 2020, people said Biden's going to win, America's going to come together, the conservatives who back Trump are going to realize they made a mistake, everything's going to come back together. It's 8 months later, nothing like that has happened, and you have European officials wondering how strong an ally America is, including Canada, Japan, France, and Germany. There's literally no sign of America coming back together. The polarization is getting worse every single year, and it is, according to multiple polling stations, equivalent to 1864. How do we know this doesn't get worse and it just boils over?
Well, I don't think it's going to boil over into anything that requires California to secede from the union. I mean, if it, I just don't think that's going to happen. It's people have doom and gloom predictions for everything. People thought, this election was stolen. There's going to be a revolution. There's going to be this and that. And sometimes there's like we get to the brink of bad things happening, and sometimes bad things happen, like January 6th, and you get people in the Capitol with guns and people getting shot and they die, and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe this is happening in America. And then the president's sworn in as normal. And then so we get to the brink in the United States all the time. I mean, Vietnam War, I bet you anything, 1969, people were having the same conversation somewhere and thinking like it gets worse and worse. We're assassinating all our good leaders. Our RFK is dead. MLK is dead. JFK is dead. Johnson's not running for re-election. He's standing down. And then like 5 years later, Watergate. So I think that we go through these cycles, and I think that we're going through a tumultuous cycle that is similar to the 1960s. I really think we do. We had free speech. There was a sea change in the way that we thought about free speech in the 60s, women's rights, about lots of things. And just in the last 10 or 15 years, we've done the same thing here. Gay marriage. Well, I remember in first year of law school was 2008. Proposition 8 passed in California, constitutional amendment outlawing same-sex marriage. Yeah, constitutional amendment. And it passed with like 55% support. Within 10 years, that couldn't pass today. It's like 70% support for same-sex marriage, might even be higher. And it's legal nationwide. But back then, half the country, and this was California, You know, in 2008, like it's not like this was a conservative state, but it voted for same-sex marriage. So there's a sea change in civil rights in just 10 years, and so popular opinion shifts very quickly. So I'm not. Yeah, it's possible that, like you said, the trajectory might get bigger, but both of those things, you know, the world didn't end when we were on either side of 2008 and 2013 when same-sex marriage was legalized. So. Yeah, it's I don't know. My point is we're in a tumultuous time.
Sure.
And so I think we will continue to live in interesting times because we are a cursed civilization.
But America survived previously bad times,
right.
and it turned out okay.
That's my point. You remember what I thought.
Yeah, I remember. I remember. We're trying to be fair, just having a conversation.
I know you're helping me.
What about the fact that California is a donor state? And we give a lot of money to about 25 to 35 states who basically talk trash on us every night because of our values, you know, pro-gay rights, pro-free speech, pro-LGBTQ, pro-immigrants. Is it fair for Californians over the last 45 years to pay so much more into 25 to 35 states who fundamentally don't like us because of our values? I mean, is it okay to give someone money and support them when you don't have enough money to fund your own schools and your own roads, knowing that that person does nothing but really badmouth you every other day? And this has gone on for 45 years. Is that an acceptable state of existence for Californians?
Well, we don't give money to other states. We pay citizens of California pay taxes to the federal government, and then the federal government runs programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And there might be a lot of poor people in Alabama, and so they get a lot of funding from those programs. We're a donor state in that we might have a net contribution to the federal government over the amount that we're drawing out, but that's because of our prosperity. That's because we have people in California that have just a ridiculous amount of money, and so that we have so many billionaires, and all these companies. Apple is here and Google is here, and so when these companies, some of them even pay taxes, and when they do pay taxes, there's going to be a lot of money that goes in. So I think that's just a reflection of our prosperity. And I don't care if people in Alabama talk crap about me. I have a thick skin, and I don't mind the fact that they need help because the people there are poor.
Even when we're not able to afford good schools for our own kids and fix
we can afford them. We have, like I said, we have a budget surplus of between 70 and 80 billion dollars this year. For 1/10 of that, you can make every public college in California free. We're just overflowing with money. They have to put it in the right.
Sure, but it's a record bumper year. I mean, the amount of budget surplus has never been this high. It's a highly unique feature because of the COVID and the way that people were staying home and buying products. For 35 years, we've been unable to fund our schools and our roads and our poor neighborhoods to the level equivalent of Alabama. Why is it okay for Alabama kids to have better schools than us and more?
I don't know if that's accurate. I would dispute whether Alabama is better than us in really anything except hurricanes and poverty. They probably exceed us there. But we don't give money to Alabama. And it's not, there's different revenue sources. Rich people here pay a lot of taxes to the federal government. Poor people don't pay any. If you're poor enough, you don't pay any federal taxes. So the taxes aren't assessed at like California, give us your pound of flesh, pay your tithe to the federal government so we can give it to Alabama, these guys who are jerks to you. That's not how it works. So I don't see that as a system.
Not directly, but no, you're right. Not directly, but that is the effect. The effect is that we pay federal income tax. The effect is that it goes to 25 to 35 states who need those programs. But the effect is that we're not able to put as much money to our communities, and we're overfunding other communities when that money could be here. And these are people who don't like us. And I don't have a problem funding poor people in Alabama, but I've lived in the west side of Fresno. I've lived in South Central Los Angeles. I've lived in downtown Oakland. I've lived in West Sac. I've also traveled to Texas and Alabama. We have poverty worse than they do. Why is it not okay for us to spend our money on us when they get to do better? And they trash talk us.
Well, I don't care if anyone's trash talking California. I get to live here and I love it here. So I don't, people can say whatever they want, but again, we don't give money to Alabama, and individual citizens pay federal income tax and it goes to the federal government. And California the state, they also pay to the state government. The state government is the one that funds education here, primarily, not the federal government. And so the state government of California, they could spend more money in different ways if they want to. And some communities do. They raise their own taxes with parcel taxes, and they dole out the money. We have very good school districts in California, and we have some very difficult school districts in California. But whether Alabama is spending money, their own state money, on their own schools, and talking crap about us does not affect that at all. So I don't see even a connection there.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Here's an article in LA Weekly. California is home to the worst public schools in America, but we'll cover that later. Closing comments, 2 minutes. How would you like to be seen as a governor to 40 million people, world's 5th largest economy, and you have 2 minutes to put your idea inside their head? We asked you this question at the beginning. We're returning to the question, see if the question's a little bit different after we've gotten into some of the details about the 2 policy areas you wanted to focus and perhaps encourage the government to move to. What would you say to be remembered? How would you like people to remember you in the days up to the election?
I'm a free speech lawyer. I am a rational, sane human being, and I'm running for governor not because I am trying to overthrow the state or get Newsom out of office. I'm running so that Governor Newsom, or whoever is the next governor, adopts a free speech and free college plank into their platform, into their administration. Free speech is important. It is not protected on university campuses, especially like at UC San Diego, where they spent $800,000 fighting a student newspaper and trying to squash it into the ground, and they got sued by the ACLU. And if I were governor, and I hope the next governor does do this, they should initiate a statewide review of student conduct codes throughout all of California's many public colleges and universities. And for those that comply with the First Amendment, make them tuition free with a stroke of the pen, using the budget surplus we already have. 1/10 of this year's budget surplus can replace all tuition dollars at Cal States and UCs across the entire state. So I'm Daniel Watts. I'm a free speech lawyer. I'm running to send a message, and every vote I get sends a message to the next governor of California that free speech and free college are important and should be protected.
Thank you very much. You can find Daniel Watts at Governor Watts on Facebook. Here's the link. And that's you, right? Facebook, Governor
That's
Watts?
me. Yeah, Governor Watts. Governor Watts on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all Governor Watts.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming
Thank
up.
you.
And please tell anybody else that you know. We're willing to interview all candidates, and we appreciate you running. Really, really appreciate the fact that you're a regular person jumping in the race. We're there's so many professional politicians who are fake, and you're not sure who they are. It's nice to see actual real humans who have a heart running in the race because they actually care. I think that's the best possible thing for democracy, to have more real humans actually running.
I agree. I like that there are so many average people, regular people running this year.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. This is a great format, and you've done a public service this campaign.
I really appreciate it. Okay. That will be the end of our show, and thank you for coming up.
Thanks.
Just to point out that here's the article, LA Weekly, California is home to some of the worst public schools. Here's also a chart. Let me show you that right now. This is what I'm talking about. So no offense. So the worst school funding. There's California, 3rd from worst. Here's the states doing well. We're now dead last. So we are funding these states to do better than us. Here's an article talking about California home to some of the worst schools in America. Let's just try Google California worst infrastructure in America. Let's see what happens. Best and worst by state. These states have the worst roads in the USA. District of Columbia and California have the worst roads. So not that hard to identify. Type in worst roads, schools, dams, seaports, airports, levees. we have it worse than basically all of the other states, and yet we indirectly fund them? That was the question, and it was true. You can verify it for yourself. Thank you.